Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about the biggest sneaker flops in 2024. First of all, what does it mean for a sneaker to have flopped? Well, in my opinion, and remember this is just my opinion, it's when a sneaker underperforms according to the context preceding its release. Whether you like it or not, we're living in a time where the success of certain releases is very much determined by the time it takes for that same said sneaker to sell out. The resale market also has a heavy influence on whether or not a particular sneaker is successful or not. And whilst I'm not suggesting for a single moment that resale value and sellout times determine whether or not a sneaker is hot, it does indisputably correspond to the demands for that sneaker. And obviously, the greater the demands, the greater the success of the release. Something like that. Should we get into it? Let's get into it with a pretty obvious one, pretty easy one. I don't think there's much controversy around this. The Adidas Fear of God Athletics collaboration. And I think it's pretty obvious to understand why. This collaboration was first announced back at the back end of 2020. I feel like people were just completely over it before it even arrived. Secondly, the price points of the items was too high. I mean, if you can cop something very similar from the Essentials line for like half the price, why wouldn't you? Third, it sort of felt like the pieces themselves were already dated. A lot of these items feel like they could have been brought straight out of a Fear of God catalog from 2017 or 2018. And because it was an athletics collaboration somewhat aimed at performance, it was hard to see a place in a context wherein these garments or these sneakers would give any sort of performance advantage. I don't actually mind the Fear of God basketball one and some of the other trainers that he made. I think some of them are quite nice, and I wouldn't even mind maybe picking up one or two of the items on sale. But I think generally speaking, given the hype, given all of the talking up that people were doing for Jerry and this collaboration, this could certainly be considered a disastrous flop. We're going to stay with Adidas. Got to talk about Yeezys. I know you could probably characterize the Yeezys as more of a fall off than a flop, but there is a context where the flop applies, at least in my opinion. We'll go through that first. You guys might remember not long after the whole breakup between Adidas and Ye was announced, there was this narrative going out around online about Yeezys being a potentially big investment because they weren't going to be making any more moving forward. And so resellers were sort of clamoring to get their hands on some of the Yeezys that were being released because they were never going to come out again and they were only going to go up in price. Well, that is the flop because these same Yeezys are now sitting and going on sale pretty much everywhere. And this is crazy to see. If you were to show 2017 me a picture or a catalog of Sports Direct featuring Yeezys on sale, even like nice models like the Pirate Blacks or Wave Runners in certain sizes, I would be thinking, bro, you have to be in some sort of parallel universe. I mean, the fall off in hype is crazy to think about. Next up, Nike SBs. Not so much a flop, a little bit of a fall off. Over the past few years, Nike SB Dunks have been really popular. GR colorways selling out, going on to resell. And there was this feeling early on in the year that Nike SB hype had subsided once we'd had a retro of some of the sneakers from the J-Pack, including the purples, core purples, including the pine greens. And then when the Chicago SBs retroed and they didn't sell out straight away and they were available for hardly any money on the resale markets, there was this feeling that SB hype had pretty much fallen off. If you look at the SB releases from this year, pretty much all of the GR colorways are way under retail, and a lot of them have actually been going on sale in skate shops. And this is going to be music to the ears of you SB collectors out there. When it comes to the collabs, we've had 2 or 3 pretty successful collabs this year. I want to point to the Futuras, obviously, and then the Verdes. But apart from those 2 SB releases, mostly all of the others have definitely underperformed when you compare them to the popularity of 2 and 3 years ago. So again, maybe not so much a flop, but definitely a fall off, and a welcome fall off if you are into SBs. The Nike Cult Classics program. Nike decided to go and put a whole bunch of marketing spin as well as this fancy label on something that they do all the time anyway, which is just retro old sneakers. If you look at the collection, we have shoes like the Air Force One Low Snake. Bro, those are on sale. The Air Force One Low Linens, they're on sale. In fact, I wish I'd waited to get those on sale because I paid full price for mine like a silly Billy. We had the Dunks, bro, the Ultramans, the ceramics, the veneers. All of these are heavily reduced at the moment. In fact, I think the only sneaker from the Cult Classics program that has gone on to sellouts is the Ultramarines, but those are out there for retail as well. Now, I think if they'd done this Cult Classics program a couple of years ago, these would have flown, these would have sold out, these would have resold. But because there's so much fatigue out there around so many Dunks and so many Air Force Ones, we really didn't have any appetites for these sneakers at all. Foamposites, KD4s, it might be tricky to argue that these have been flops in that we've seen over the years Nike Basketball Retro some pretty high-key models from back in the day that were really popular. Shoes like, say, for example, the Watch the Throne LeBron 9s or the South Beach 8s or even the LeBron Palmer 9 lows. We've seen that retroing these sneakers in today's climate hasn't really gone down particularly well. A lot of those shoes have been available for retail and under. And I just need to take a moment to remind you that I'm not for a second saying that this is a bad thing, that these shoes in their retro form have failed to sell out. This is great news, I'm sure, for you guys out there that collect these types of sneakers. But what I am saying is that it's crazy to think that in 2024, when you have the return of these Foamposites in OG colorways or these KD4s that were once going for like over £1,000 or $1,500 in the resale market, they would actually end up going on to sit and in some cases go under retail. I think this era of shoes is probably maybe 5 years away from, or maybe even 10 years away from being like popular in a retro sense, because they're not really that far back in people's minds to the point where people are nostalgic about them. They sort of feel like they came out not that long ago, and I guess that's because they didn't. The Air Jordan 4, again, not so much a flop, I want to say, as maybe a little bit of a fall off. I think the increased retail price, as well as the dip in quality, as well as the fact that a lot of people have been stocking up their Jordan 4 collections over the past 4 or 5 years. It's become a bit oversaturated. All of that type of stuff, I think, has contributed to Jordan 4s being less popular this year. Air Max DN, I don't know if this is a fair one because you've got to give Nike a little bit of credit for at least coming up with a new Air Max model. And I would say that the silhouette itself is nice, like it's a good looking shoe. The technology isn't particularly groundbreaking, it's the same old Air Max reimagined technology. But yeah, these haven't really gone off, have they? Pretty much all the colorways or all the GR colorways out there are available on sale right now. They've had maybe one good collaboration with Supreme, which was a pretty boring one and might have only been successful because it was like the launch of the entire model. I don't know. Is that a little bit too harsh? You can let me know what you think. The Nike Field General collaborations that they did with, for example, Union were pretty underwhelming. And I guess that's going to segue nicely into the final section of today's video. We're going to talk about collaborations that have flopped or fallen off. I think Union is a good example of a sneaker collaborator that has definitely fallen off in the eyes of a lot of people. Now, don't get me wrong, if you love Union and you love Union collabs, that's fine. I'm sure there's still 2 or 3 of you guys still out there. But if you just look at some of their recent collabs, particularly on the Field General, this was pretty underwhelming. Things didn't sell out. They're out there on the resale market currently for half price. It just feels like they're a little bit washed right now. A Ma Maniére, I do think that parts of the collection were a little bit of a flop. Say, for example, the Air Force One lows. Those things sat on the websites for some time. The Air Max 95s sat for some time. In fact, the Jordan 3s sat for some time. The Converse Weapons might even still be available. In fact, pretty much this entire collection failed to sell out in all sizes instantaneously, which I think is probably a reflection of the fatigue that a lot of people have been feeling with regard to A Ma Maniére. Drake, flop or fall off? I don't know. I think Drake has some good shoes, but I also think Drake has some shocking shoes. And I also think in today's climate, in the post-Kendrick beef era, his clout has been somewhat diminished to the point where people aren't really looking to grab any of his Nocta stuff on Nike. The Nike Air Trainer Huarache from Cortez flop. Could you call it a flop? I don't know. This is a tricky one. I guess I would label it a flop simply in the context of last year's super successful Air Max 95 release. You guys remember that collab from last year was one of the collabs of the year from a marketing standpoint. You guys remember all of the hubbub that they created here in London, over in Paris, over in New York. You had all of these viral moments. You had this crazy turnouts for all of the different releases. Whereas with the Huarache, bro, we got some drones over the Thames. There was a maze in Manchester. It just didn't really feel like there was as much buzz created around this particular release. Now, I know that sneakers in general this year have been trending down. People have been stockpiling their collections over the past 4, 5, 10 plus years, whatever. And so the idea of just going after every other sneaker release these days isn't like it was a few years ago. I totally get that. I get that the economic conditions right now are such that copying every other sneaker release left, right, and center isn't feasible. I know that these brands are massively oversaturating the market with products left, right, and center. I get all of that. And so it's within the knowledge of that context that I bring to you today's flop list. Remember, it's not to deride these sneakers or these collaborators or these brands or whatever. It's really just an observation from my point of view as to what I have seen go down. What do you guys think? Do you guys think this was a fair list? Would you add any to the list? Would you subtract any? Feel free to let me know what your biggest sneaker flops were of 2024. I would love to hear your thoughts. And as always, I appreciate you guys watching the video and taking time to like it as well as engage with it. And I will see you guys on the next video. Take care for now and peace.